We're going back for seconds, thirds, fourths of the Hornets Media Day sound smorgasbord. We're getting there again. Mark Williams, what did he have to say about his injury? We dive into detail on that. Plus, Tidjane Salaun, can he play this year? What does he have to do to play this year? We'll get to all of that today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. There's Doug eating up all those heapings of sound bites that we were talking about. Doug Branson, everyhornetsboxscore.com is his Substack. You can also find his subtext information there, too.
I've been doing a lot of that, by the way. A lot of subtext. I mean, I've been tweeting out, or not tweeting, I don't know, subtexting. I don't know. It's the Sicko Brigade. Join subtext.com.
Don't subtweet. If you're going to tweet, then call them out. Don't subtweet, right?
I got tweet in my, even though Twitter's gone, like I have tweet in my brain is just the thing that you say when you post because I did it for so long. But I've been texting people quotes from training camp, the most important things that are coming out of Durham. So hit me up, man. That's why I'm doing a lot of that stuff now. You know, I used to do a lot of that on Twitter, and then I was like, I'm giving away my good stuff for free.
Yeah, not anymore. You know, people sign up for the Substack, people sign up for the text, and also you could find David Walker's live hits from Durham in his North Carolina hat and Carolina Panther shirt. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. We got some sound to get to from that show, some sound to get to from players stepping up to the podium. I mean, this is what Hornets Media Day is all about. It gives us about a week and a half worth amount of content, and we're going to go back to that table a million different times. I do want to talk about Mark, though. Like, I know the update is that he's fine. Like, he has the 2-week injury with the strained tendon in his left foot, going to be reevaluated. Doesn't look like he's going to miss the start of regular season if all goes well. Might miss some preseason. He's going to miss some preseason, so we'll just see how much. But we panicked. We didn't know what to do with this, and it's understandable because Mark was all out. He was out all last year with a back injury. Mm-hmm. When we threw him out there again, he played I don't even know how many minutes before he was right back out, and then didn't come back at all as the season would go on. Like, the soft confirmation came from Steve Clifford after an Orlando Magic game in like the last month of the season, saying we're not going to get Mark back. It's like, oh, okay, well, there you go. There's the confirmation. So we were all worried a little bit. He had spent already a ton of time answering questions about his injury at the podium. We, on Wes and Walker, had asked him a couple of questions at the beginning of our sit-down with him. And then at the end, like, he brought it up, Doug. So I had this back and forth with him. At the end of our segment, I just asked him, look, man, are we too worried about you? Seriously, are we too panicked because of this strained tendon in your left foot? It has us all rolling around frantically. Like, what's going on? And so Mark Williams said this when I asked him if we're too panicked about this injury.
I get it, right? Like, I was out all last year. You know, we're not putting out videos of us playing pickup every week. Like, I get, like, you don't see. It's hard to judge something you don't see, right? So then you just see that out the blue all of a sudden. Like, it's a reasonable feeling to feel that way, but I'm fine, right? Like, I've been playing fives, I've been doing contact stuff, I've been doing everything, right? I've been able to deal with contact, jump, every unexpected hit, bump, you name it, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is just a small bump in the road, right? I think we obviously I'm not going to be in training camp, but, you know, preseason, regular season, you know, looking ahead, feeling good.
It's about as reassuring a comment you can get from a guy that suffers an injury that we're really, really worried about. And again, I told you this too. The fact that they made him available to us, knowing that we're going to ask some, you know, back and forth conversational questions where it's not like so formulaic with the Q&A at the podium. It's reassuring here, Doug.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not going to be totally sold on him or any of these guys that have spent most of the past 2 seasons on the Pine. I'm not going to be confident about any of it until I see them play 30 or 40 straight games. I mean, that's the bottom line. We've got to see it in action. And I think Mark's dead on there. Like, we haven't seen a lot of him in the offseason. I think if they have another season this season, like they've had the past 2 seasons, my advice to the Charlotte Hornets would be to hire multiple people to follow around the Hornets in the offseason and just film them doing stuff so that you can reassure fans that they are healthy. Because there is some sort of, and this is not all Mark's fault. None of this is Mark's fault, honestly, but there is some built-in trauma because everybody else has been injured too. It's not just about Mark. If it were just about Mark, it would be one thing. But this is about LaMelo. This is about Cody Martin. This is about Gordon Hayward. Guys that aren't even on the team anymore. This is about. So, yeah, I mean, I feel for Mark in a certain sense, but in another sense, it's like I got to just see this guy play.
No, you have to see him play. And I think he realizes that. That's why, I also asked him in that interview too, what were your emotions like when you first suffered the injury? He said, it was initially a whirlwind because you're trying to figure out the severity of it. Now you don't know how much time you're going to miss. I had already missed all last year with a very serious injury. Hopefully this isn't that. The fact that it's in my foot, I don't know if that's a ton better than the back, but you would feel like it's better than the back. He was talking about the whirlwind of emotions. And then, of course, once he got the diagnosis, he was relieved and he was discussing the injury like he was relieved. I just wanted to ask him that, too, because he had gotten so tired of it and not in a way that was combative. It was just, look, this is what I have to do. I have to reassure fans. I'm telling you I'm fine. And I appreciated him going in detail about how he was real physical, going through fives. He listed all the stuff that he was doing because there was lack of clarity this offseason. Perhaps it's just because there's not media access as much during the offseason. We're not getting a ton of Rod Boone write-ups. We're not having any media availability. These guys are going on trips. If they're staying in Charlotte, they're working out, but we don't see it as much. The social media account just isn't as active. So we just don't see it, and we're not hearing from Charles Lee as much. Summer League is there. We're all focused on Summer League, right? So this is what Mark understands. And I thought it was like a real level-headed response, too. He's not angry at you, the fan. It's like, yeah, I get it, but I'm telling you guys, I'll be okay, hopefully in 2 weeks when they reevaluate this.
Well, he sounded frustrated a little bit that they even marked this as an injury because I think he mentioned something like he didn't even want to go for the MRI. Like he was like, I'm good. And they were like, nah. Yeah. You only played 19 games last season. You ought to go in for the MRI. And I think, too, you have to look at it from his perspective. Like, once the sort of injury moniker or injured guy moniker jumps on you, particularly at the center position where it's like more career ending for those guys than seemingly anyone else on the floor. Like, once that jumps on you, I think it could be difficult to shake off. And he mentioned, other than the back injury, a lot of his other injuries have been minor. But, the thumb injury ended his season, but the season was almost over. But again, the perception, once that jumps on you, it can be tough to shake off. So I can see where he would get frustrated. But, he also, this I think would be different if Mark Williams were a finished product, where we were confident when he was healthy, we know what we're going to get. But I don't think that's the case either. And that was evident in Media Day when you had Charles Lee talking about him wanting Mark to develop into a player that can dominate the paint, that they're watching Brook Lopez tape together to talk about shot blocking, getting to the spot early. He wants Mark Williams to be, a pillar of his defense. It starts with the guy up top, the MIG, as we've been talking about, the most important guy, the guy guarding the ball. But what happens, look, you're not going to be able to guard the ball every single time. Guys in the NBA offensively are too skilled. They've got too many moves, and you've only got so many counter moves as a defensive player. Also, the rules don't really favor you as a defensive player. So it has to be this sort of dance, this ballet that happens between the MIG and a guy like Mark Williams who's sitting back there anticipating, being early to the spot, not being late, and being able to get not only shot blocks, but also shot defenses as well.
I'm excited as hell for a healthy Mark season. I know everybody is, but if Mark in this system, I think there's a lot of potential for a ton of fun plays. If he's going to be roaming as an athletic 7-foot guy that has arms that extend forever, I mean, I'm hoping, can we get to like Miles Turner block numbers? Is that something that's possible in this defense? Even if they're watching Brook Lopez numbers, I guess I haven't looked this up, but I know Mark Williams is more athletic than he is. And I would think that might lead to more blocks if he's roaming. Yeah, so Brook Lopez, 2.5 blocks. Okay, that's a lot the last couple of years. So he's putting up numbers like that. And if Mark is more athletic than Brook, as Brook is older, maybe those numbers do get to like Miles Turner type. Can you lead the league in blocks per game? I think that's on the table, and that's why I get so excited about this in this scheme.
More athletic, and now I think weighs more. We got some info that he's 260 now, which sounds like a lot, but when you look at 7-footers, and I think Miles Turner not technically a 7-footer, I think he's 6'11", but when you look at 7-footers, 260, I think puts him on not really the median, not right in the middle, but a little below that, but still like puts him into the sort of heavier class of the athletic center. But he's like 20 pounds away from Embiid, Nurkic, who are some of the other beefy boys? Brook Lopez. I mean, they're watching tape of Brook Lopez, and that's fine for technique. But, like, Brook Lopez is a monster physically in a way that Mark Williams is not. So there's only – and Coach Lee said this, like, they're different players. Yeah. But, like, you've got to look at that, too. So weighs 260, that's great. You have some concerns, too, with the back injury and the foot injury. Putting on too much weight ruined Emeka Okafor's career. If we go back to some Bobcats history, like him putting on weight, they pointed to that as like he put on weight too early and too quickly, and it exacerbated injuries that he already had. So there is some concern there, but he has to get stronger at the same token.
Yeah, hopefully everybody has learned their lesson on the weight stuff. I know Joel Embiid dropped a lot of weight this year because of the injuries that he's faced in the past, and I know they're going to be a lot more careful with him. He's got his MVP, so it's just get Joel Embiid to the postseason. Hopefully he stays healthy there. A little bit different with Mark so young in his career, but look, I'm all in. You guys know that. I think Mark has a skill set that is pretty hard to find in that body. With that IQ, too. I think he's a really smart guy. I think Charles Lee is the right coach for him. I'm all in if Mark Williams is healthy, and I think he could do a lot of big things for this organization. Charles Lee, Jeff Peterson, they believe it, too. They're bringing him all over the place, trying to immerse him into winning culture. I'm hoping that we can bring that here to Charlotte. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Tidjane's training. Tidjane Salaun, also a guy I just love talking to. And I don't even understand a lot of the stuff that he's saying right now. That's not his fault. I don't speak French, so that makes a lot of sense. He's also, really engaging, really welcoming when you talk to him. I've said it a million times with Hornets Real Access. Let's get to some Tidjane stuff in just a moment on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live, play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I love having it all in one spot, so I don't have to open up a different tab. I can just have all the information right in front of my face. I love it. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Tidjane Salaun, also an interesting storyline heading into the season. Perhaps more questions about Tidjane being a 6th overall pick than there are with other 6th overall picks here, Doug. So we got some quotes from Tidjane at Media Day and at training camp. We got some quotes about Tidjane from Charles Lee and others. What kind of quotes do you want to bring to the table? Live on the scene, of course, fed to us by David Walker.
Right. Well, yeah, I'll give you the quotes here in a second. But it is interesting to note that I don't even think to this day right now, or as we tape this, that there is Tidjane Salaun Media Day sound on the Hornets YouTube, which is strange because he's the 6th overall pick. Like, typically when you have a pick that high, a team is going to recognize that there is fan interest around that guy. But I think that signals, hey, Tidjane is a project. We're probably not going to hear a ton from him this season, and that there are veterans that it would be probably better for fans to hear from because those guys are going to be playing the majority of the minutes.
Well, and another thing to consider, too, is, like, this guy is so young, and he has not been to Charlotte, North Carolina, and he has not been to America. And so I think there is just some, like, how many sound bites can you use to where there's value to English-speaking people based off of this 15-second clip? And it's why, just to give you a little peek behind the curtain, we pre-recorded the Tidjane Salaun interview on Wes and Walker, and it was damn good enough to put out there for everybody to consume. And there's just that barrier where you're trying to figure out what he's saying. It's not perfect for us to try to hear, like, okay, we can still make out what you're saying, though. And the personality, that feeds through the airwaves as much as anything he says. I still think it's an interview you want to listen to. But we had, I don't even want to say a fail-safe. We just wanted to make sure that we had the ability to edit some of the pauses, make it a more consumable product, but not edit any of the words, right? So maybe some of that was going on as to how much value they thought there was in putting it up on the website, but just kind of some of the stuff that we were talking about with the Hornets when trying to conduct that interview.
Maybe that's it. But let's get to his game. Let's talk about his game because that's what Coach Lee was talking about and what Tidjane was talking about at training camp day 2. Here's Coach Lee, quote, "I think that we're just going to have to get to a point," talking about Tidjane Salaun here, "where we kind of dial back the engine and teach him the subtleties of the game. Like, you got to break down your feet before you get here, but you love to start with a player that has a high engine and a high motor, and then you just work on all kinds of other techniques and stuff as you go." What do you think about, what does that quote tell you there from Coach Lee about where Tidjane is and, where they think he will be this season?
There's a lot of room to grow, and it's going to be a while before he steps out onto an NBA court. And it's something that I thought as soon as he was selected, even in Summer League, where it did not go horribly wrong by any stretch of the imagination. He showed us some talent as to why you could be a top 10 pick. The man just doesn't know how to play an NBA game right now via what you hear from Charles Lee. And when we ask Charles and Jeff Peterson what it's going to take to get Salaun on the court, because we asked both of them that, it's, making sure you're controlling your body. Even Salaun saying it's not all about just working out. It's like kind of slowing down at times, not always going 100%. Every single play, it's trying to think a little bit, play a thinking man's game rather than going all over the place, showing your effort physically. And until he understands the thinking man's part, like it's going to be a while before he steps out there with the vets and the people that have been playing in the NBA for a couple years plus.
Yeah, think about Brandon Miller last season, and he's a younger player too. I mean, did play a year of college, but still a younger guy. And he came onto the scene, and everyone was talking about how quickly he was picking up information. And you saw it as soon as he got on the floor. Like it looked a little slower than I mean, when you put him side by side with Nick Smith Jr., who was an Energizer Bunny running around there. But Brandon was methodical. He was seeing things happen on the floor. He was anticipating, and so it looked a bit slower. And so I think that's where Tidjane has got to get to. And he even mentioned it in his availability for training camp. He said, when asked about what the biggest adjustment coming over here to play in an NBA-style training camp to Europe, he said, quote, "The ball movement. You have to play more with your brain. In Europe, you play with a lot of system. Here, you have transition, and after that, you just keep going. Run, shoot with confidence, and there is only one pass. Just shoot if you're open. In Europe, we try to slow down every time." So you heard slow down there, but that's slow down in terms of like the way the play is developing.
Not pace, right. Yeah.
Right, but the thing is, like, it's so much faster that you have to be able to sort of slow that down with your brain and say, all right, I can process these 5 things that just happened in terms of how a defender reacted or what's the defense giving me here on this handoff. Like, you have to break all of that down so quickly and slow it down. And that's the challenge really for any rookie, but particularly one that's coming over from Europe in a different style of play.
I'm pulling for this kid too. He's fun. We were talking about it before we started recording, Doug. He understands what he's getting into. I think he understands the level of play that he has to display in order to get out there on the court. I think this is a different world. I think he's totally accepting of that. And also he's not scared. Charles Lee, Jeff Peterson, I mean, they freaking love this guy. I mean, we've seen it on camera, but even at practice, on the practice court, media day, like all they say is they light up when they talk about him. Like they can't wait to see what the finished product is and just the next stages of his development are. They're so excited about what he can become. And he has the respect of the players too. They enjoy Tidjane because I think there is a level of maturity about him despite being so young. He's also fun. He's not boring by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. Once we start to get over that language barrier and we're able to communicate more effectively as a fan base, as a media and player, I think we're going to be in for some great quotes. We already have some great quotes. It's one of those guys that you really hope figures it out and figures it out here. Like you want him to be here in the city of Charlotte going forward.
Yeah, so he seems adult about it, as adult as you can be at that age. He seems mature about it in terms of like understanding what he has to work on, while at the same time giving that work ethic, giving that, going 1,000 miles an hour. And as Lee said, you'd rather have that and try to slow it down as opposed to have someone that's overthinking or that's not confident. That's tougher to get that guy to where he needs to be as opposed to a guy that's going 1,000 miles an hour and trying to slow him down. But I think we should be real about this. I think we should be honest about this. And to be honest about this is to say that there are no guarantees with this player. He can be mature. He can work super hard. He can go, as fast as he wants and as hard as he wants. And he may never be able to pick up some of this stuff. It's just there are no guarantees when you're talking about this. I have all the hope in the world that it's going to work out, but I think we should be honest about sort of the dice roll that this team took with the 6th overall pick, and it's going to take time and to determine, because like the only way that things slow down for Tidjane is for him to get more experience over time. It's not something that like they can fix in a practice or in a game. Like this just has to happen over time, and it's probably got to happen in Greensboro as opposed to affecting their ability to win in Charlotte.
They're playing the long game with this one. He's not going to get 17 minutes per game. I know it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but Anthony Black was the 6th overall pick last year with Orlando. He averaged 16.9 minutes per game. I don't think he's going to reach that. And that was with Anthony Black. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, having some shooting questions coming into the league. I think he shot well enough, but regardless, like he's 17 minutes per game, over under. Like I'm taking the under on that. I just don't think he's going to be a regular part of the rotation. They're playing the long game, and we'll see what Tidjane can do as we move forward. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees! Bees everywhere!
Tidjane's a new player, but let's talk about an old one turned coach, Kemba Walker. What's his effect on the roster so far? We'll get to some of those comments coming up next. LOH. One guy I was hoping to be able to talk to on Media Day, Doug, it was Kemba. Just bringing him back home. He wanted to come back and coach, and it was how much time elapsed? I think it was the next day after he announced his retirement. We did the career eulogy, and then he comes back and coaches with the Hornets. If not the next day, it felt like just the next couple of days. But he's here. Remember, he was at the introductory presser with Charles Lee before that news was announced. So, something fishy was already in the air. And finally, he's here helping out LaMelo, being a player development type of guy. We've talked about already the kind of impact he can have considering his growth, considering him having not figured it out in the NBA until probably, year 4, year 5. You see a monster jump from him. So welcome home, Kemba. And it's cool to see the players really gravitate towards what was an all-time good guy, like a first-team all-good guy in the NBA. Everybody freaking loved him. What were some of the comments shared on Kemba throughout Media Day and training camp?
Yeah, it's very cool to see Kemba back. It's not a surprise to me at all that he was not a featured player during Media Day, even though, again, it's one of those things like I was talking about with Tidjane and not featuring him very much online. Like, you understand it, but it's still odd because, like, Kemba Walker is the greatest Hornet of all time by Walker's measure, by my measure, by even the team's measure, I think. Yeah. And yet, we don't really hear from him at all during those festivities. But that makes sense because Kemba is the kind of guy, he's a lunch pail guy. I just want to get to work and doesn't want to make it about him. He was never that kind of guy. So this totally makes sense. But he was asked about a lot during a Media Day. And Jeff Peterson, talking about Kemba, said, I mean, I feel like we got to steal being able to get this coaching experience to connect with the guys and then teach them not just on the court, but just habits in general, like what it takes to be able to have a career at the level he did for that long has been really special. Seth Curry, who played against Kemba a lot, said Kemba has been great. His energy in the gym so far throughout September has been great. Being back around him is one of my favorite people in the league. Everybody loves him. So I think he's going to lean on him for any advice and wisdom. And then LaMelo Ball talking about the fact that he's been to his house. Kemba's been over to LaMelo's place. They're establishing a relationship, which I think should be exciting to fans of the Charlotte Hornets for those two guys to connect. I mean, his title, Walker, is player enhancement coach. So to me, I take that as we've hired Kemba to go and work with specific, not all players, but specific players to enhance their play. And I think Kemba is one of those guys. My question to you, Walker, would be like, what do you want LaMelo to most soak in from Kemba Walker?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I think for the most part, I think Kemba can help LaMelo with some of the pick and roll nuances of the game. Not that LaMelo needs a ton of help there, but Kemba was good. Like, we can joke about it. It's not like Cody Zeller was the best in the world, but Kemba and Cody pick and roll, like you got a lot of points off of that just because Cody knew what to do in those situations. And I remember, I think I talked with Nada. It might have been like the day after Kemba retired or maybe the day that Kemba was announced to the coaching staff. And we asked, who are the players that stand to benefit the most from Kemba's presence on the team? LaMelo being the obvious, but we're trying to figure out other players. And I brought up Mark. Like, I feel like Kemba can help Mark in pick and roll situations where, this is your timing, this is your spacing, this is what you need to be looking for. If LaMelo, at different spots on the floor, like this is how I want you to set a screen for LaMelo. LaMelo, this is how I want you to rub shoulders with him. These are the tricks in the trade of, singing beautiful music with your center. Like that's what I kind of want to see is some nuances of the pick and roll game. Those start to develop as LaMelo enters his fifth year, which is crazy, and Mark enters his third.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to help. Pick and roll ball handler wise for LaMelo Ball, in terms of him making an impact when you like sort of add his passing with his scoring, at least has a ceiling as a better or more impactful player than Kemba Walker. But I think as a scorer, Kemba Walker probably more efficient. I mean, that's one of the weaknesses of LaMelo's game is just like a scoring efficiency in the pick and roll ball handler situations when you compare him to other elite guards in the league. So I think Kemba can definitely share with him some of that. And I think too, like controlling possessions in those pick and roll ball handler situations, like once you get by the screen, being able to get all the way to the rim was something that Kemba was able to do effectively. He learned how to draw fouls towards the end of his run with Charlotte. Kemba did, so I think he can share some things there.
He learned how to complain about him too. Yeah, Kemba.
LaMelo's got that down pat. Like, he doesn't need any help with that.
Yeah, well, and it is kind of similar though, right? Didn't we want LaMelo to start complaining a little more about getting some fouls? He has the frustration fouls, maybe not so much the complaining about, hey, I got fouled and you didn't call it. And then we got the text, and then we were like, hell yeah, you deserved like that. That was an excellent tech. I'm glad you showed some aggression towards the officials because we were tired of LaMelo getting hacked and him not getting to go to the free throw line because of it.
Well, that's another thing when you talk about, so we've talked about some tangible things, but like the intangible things, something like, hey, when this happens, you just got to get to next play mentality. You can't, go into like full court press when no one's called full court press and slap down on a guy and pick up your fourth foul in the third quarter. Like, you just can't do that. Mm-hmm. So, again, maybe that message is better delivered by a guy who's made multiple All-Stars for the Charlotte Hornets than it is by anybody else. And then other things like off the court, just how to be a professional. Like, I mean, again, Kemba has some, he has some credentials. He's got all NBA credentials. He's got all-star credentials. Any kind of voice that can go towards LaMelo or Mark or any of these young players is going to be beneficial.
Last question about Kemba. It's interesting with him coming over as a coach because Kemba spent most of his time in Charlotte. We obviously had the twilight years, 1 year of an all-star appearance with Boston, and then it started to decline really quickly for Kemba before he was out of the league. But most of his experiences here, most of his experiences with Steve Clifford, and I wonder if he brings a lot of the Steve Clifford coaching style to the table because that's what helped him out so much. How much of it is the Bruce Kreitzer style, going back to, that shooting coach, right? Like, even if Clifford isn't your head coach anymore, does Kemba still bring some of the philosophies that he does? Jay Hernandez, with Kemba and Jay working so closely together, there was some overlap with LaMelo and Jay. So, where is Kemba drawing upon his coaching experience? You got some from Brad Stevens, so maybe there's some stuff that he picked up in Boston, but how much of it is going to be like 80% regurgitated Steve Clifford stuff, which it just coming from a player? Like, I wonder how much of that you're going to get.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Steve Clifford helped turn Kemba Walker into somebody that had size deficiencies into a decent pick and roll defender. And so there had to be some stuff that's behind the scenes that we're never going to hear about, wisdom, some technique stuff that Kemba can then float down into LaMelo Ball because, unfortunately, because of the injuries, Clifford didn't get all of that time with LaMelo Ball to share some of that stuff. So hopefully that is filtered through Kemba Walker and can help him improve defensively as well, because they're similar in that, like, the focus for those players is obviously going to be on the offense. They can be elite offensive players. How do you become competent defensive players and not someone that just ruins your defensive possessions over and over again?
That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. Also, make sure you text Doug if you want to find his subtext information. Go to his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at Doug Branson LOH. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. 92.7 FM. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.